Well, would you say that we're late or that we're early?
I guess that depends on whether or not we're going to do another show on Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever day it is that we normally record.
Is the glass half empty or half full?
Yeah.
Better late than never.
I suppose. Man, we've been tired and busy lately.
I know we say that every week.
But we've been busier than usual the last couple of months. And it's made staying on top of things more difficult than usual.
Yeah. Well, and then school started back this last week. And
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, we've been busier than usual. And
yeah,
we just haven't quite gotten back into the swing of things. And
yeah, we'll have to get back into a routine.
yeah.
Plus, I'm discovering, and this is going to come as a shock to you, that I have time blindness. And I know that, like, most people are like, that's not real, don't say that. And I do fully laugh at the TikToks of, like, the, like, grown-up Gen Zers that are like, I need accommodations at my job for my time blindness. And I'm like, no, you don't. You just need to get up earlier. But I think, like, mine is more like, I don't realize how long something is going to take. And so I'll think, oh, I can do this in, like, 30 minutes, and then it takes me, like, 4 hours.
Yeah.
Or, you know, or I'll think, oh, this is going to take me 4 hours, and then it takes me 30 minutes.
Well, I've noticed that a lot of the time you'll be like, I'm almost done, and then like 3 hours later, you're not done.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, she said almost done 3 hours ago. I thought that was going to be like 30 minutes.
Plus, I work better with, like, a deadline. And I know technically we have a deadline.
Yeah.
Because we're supposed to be recording, or, like, we're supposed to be releasing our episode, like, Wednesday.
At midnight.
At midnight, right? But I guess because there's no penalty.
Right.
It's not giving me enough of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, enough motivation to get it done. I don't know. I also, just throwing this out there, I also kind of feel like we should record on the weekends.
Well, and I've said that before.
And I think that's just because, like, then if I'm not done, I have the whole day to work on it. Rather than, like, trying to be like, okay, you guys work on your worksheet and leave me alone. And, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just.
We're still working out the kinks. I know it's been
are.
a year, but, you know, we're still trying to find our groove.
Yep. We are Stella. I don't know. Stella already had a groove.
Yeah, she got her groove back.
Yeah.
We've yet to have a groove.
We need to figure out Stella's original plan.
Stella, what did you do to get your groove to begin with?
That's right. And we're behind on everything. We haven't even watched Big Fat Quiz.
I know.
And that was, like, Boxing Day. I know I was dying on Boxing Day. But we still haven't even done that.
Yeah. My problem has just been that I haven't had the patience to sit down and watch something for 2 hours.
Yeah. I know you're not very good at watching things. You used to be better about watching things.
Yeah.
You're not very good at it anymore.
Now, I don't have the patience for television.
Yeah. But yeah, do you guys know Big Fat Quiz?
The Big Fat Quiz of the year, the Big Fat Quiz of everything.
It's so much fun. I always thought that, like, I feel like I would know that I made it if I was able to be on Big Fat Quiz. I think that's the cornerstone. Yeah. That's how you know.
Richard Iowati's on it this year.
I know. I'm so excited. And Catherine Ryan's always on it.
Well, and that was the other thing that I was thinking. And I was like, does it really mean that you've made it? Because, like, Catherine Ryan doesn't seem to have anything else going on.
It's okay. Because Richard Iowati's on it.
Yes.
Sometimes Noel's on it.
He hasn't been on there in a few years, though.
I'm trying to remember. Who's the one who's usually on there? I know. Don't listen to me.
There's so many that are
I know.
usually on there.
Never mind. I can't think. My brain's not working.
Jonathan Ross.
That's who I was thinking of, was Jonathan Ross. I was thinking of Jonathan Ross. Yeah. I don't know. I can't remember. I remember Richard Ayoade, and I remember seeing Catherine Ryan again.
I don't remember if Jonathan Ross is on this episode or not.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they've done a big fat quiz of everything this year or not.
I know.
I'll have to look into it. I don't know. Maybe next weekend.
Maybe. And I guess we'll see if Erin pays any attention to me right now because she restarted her Animal Crossing island.
I'm not going to play while we record. I'd like to be playing. I restarted my island because I'm trying to get ready for the new update for those of you that are in the Animal Crossing universe. So if you are, I'm sure you're just as excited. But I decided to restart my island before the update instead of just going from where I was. This is my second island because I have two switches, because I have my nephew's old one and then I have my OLED switch. I'm sure this means nothing to most of you. But
like, what are you talking about?
But my permanent island is on the old switch, and this island I restart every once in a while. And so I hadn't gotten very far on it anyway, so.
Well, best of luck to you.
Yeah.
I was really kind of just hoping they'd release a new version of the game.
I know. I think a lot of people were, but I guess this is better than nothing.
That's true. Yeah. Gives everybody something new to do on the game they already are comfortable playing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm being attacked by a little black kitten.
Yeah. Kiki is a menace. She's going through her terrible twos right now. Well, she already broke something in the room today. She won't stay off of the fish tank.
There's at least 2 people who enjoy the cats on the podcast.
Yes. We don't just have one person anymore. We have at least 2 people. At
least 2 people have told us that they enjoy the kitties on the podcast. So, there you go. Okay. Well, you ready?
Yeah, I am. I'm tired and
great
stuff.
You're so much fun.
Ready. I know. I am a bag of laughs.
A delight, one might say.
An international delight.
We'll have a sad story for you today.
Well.
So, sorry in advance. Alright, well, I actually first heard about this on TikTok a while ago.
Yeah.
Because the body cam footage had shown up on my For You page.
Yeah.
But recent events has kind of brought it back into my brain, so I dug into it a little bit, and here we go. So on March 3rd, 2020, police responded to a home in Akron, Ohio, in response to a request for a welfare check on Brenda Powell after a phone call she was on ended abruptly and bizarrely. When police arrived, they found a broken window in the back of the house, the sliding door was open, and they were greeted inside by a hysterical young woman screaming that her mother was on the floor and that there was so much blood, and telling police that someone had broken into the house. The young woman was Brenda's 19-year-old daughter, Sydney. Police removed Sydney from the house where she's screaming and crying for her dad. First responders found Brenda in her bedroom on the floor in a pool of blood, and next to her was a cast iron skillet and a serrated steak knife. She was alive, but just barely, and she was rushed to the emergency room where, unfortunately, she succumbed to her injuries shortly after arrival.
Don't start crying within the first 2 minutes of the story.
I didn't. I didn't cry. I didn't even start to cry.
Oh, well, you sounded like you were starting to cry.
I think I was just running out of breath. I'm still recovering from the flu.
Okay.
You butthead.
I'm just saying.
Brenda K. Powell was a 50-year-old mother of 2. She was born on March 19th, 1969 in Salem, Ohio, and graduated from the University of Akron. And she had one of the hardest jobs I can possibly imagine having. She was a child life specialist at the Akron Children's Hospital. Do you know what that is?
I mean, it sounds a lot like a wildlife specialist.
It's not.
She observes them from a distance and watches as they get eaten by polar bears?
No, actually, not at all. She worked with children who had been diagnosed with cancer and blood disorders.
Oh.
And her job was basically to help these children and their families kind of cope mentally and emotionally with their diagnoses.
Okay, well, that's a little different than a wildlife specialist.
Yeah, I don't want to watch them get eaten by polar bears. But I think this would be a little harder. She therapized as well as made sure that they knew exactly what was going on with their bodies and their treatments. An article from the Akron Beacon Journal interviewed a former patient saying that Brenda was like a second mom to her and is quoted as saying, "For me and so many others, she helped us patients get through the most difficult times of our lives." Brenda even organized a prom, and another patient said that while other people would treat these kids differently and focus on their illnesses, Brenda, quote, would just treat us like we were teenagers. And so it was like, she was just a good person. She worked at the hospital in this role for 28 years. And when she died, they had to set up the grief room in the auditorium because there were so many people who were grieving her. So that sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's nice to know that you're beloved, but...
Yeah. Yep. In her personal life, Brenda was married to a man named Stephen, and they had 2 children, Sydney, who I mentioned a few minutes ago, and Andrew. Brenda was said to be a very involved parent, attending all of her children's games and recitals, taking them to practices. Sorry, I really am having a hard time breathing. Stephen said that Brenda and Sydney were thick as thieves, and that Brenda was great at helping her children anytime they had issues. Sydney, who was at the house when police arrived, was 19 at the time of the attack. She was a really good student and athlete. She attended a Catholic high school. She played soccer and lacrosse, got excellent grades, was friendly and outgoing, popular. She participated in student government. Her teachers all remember just loving her in school. And because of her straight A's in school, Sydney received a scholarship to attend the University of Mount Union in Alliance, Ohio in August 2018. It was about 45 minutes away from home, but she decided to live at school, and she and her best friend from high school shared a dorm. She also joined a sorority, and just like she had in high school, she worked hard, she finished out her freshman year, and she went home for the summer. She returned back to school for her sophomore year. All the while, she stayed in pretty constant contact with her mom because, like I said before, they were like best friends. Mm-hmm. And so they texted constantly. They sent memes and pictures back and forth. So, just basically the same stuff we all do.
Right.
But here's where things start going downhill. Sydney was masking. And what she didn't tell her family, including her mother, and what her friend and roommate Lauren didn't even sense, was that Sydney was struggling hard with her college coursework. According to a Medium article that I read, she started oversleeping and missing classes, and it seemed like no matter how hard she was working, she couldn't keep up. And I feel like I can relate because when you're in high school, things are so very structured. Mm-hmm. You go to the same 7 classes every day, you go to practice, you go home and eat dinner, you do your homework, get up the next morning, you do the same thing all over again.
Right.
And these days, especially, your parents can check your grades and your attendance constantly.
Well, I was about to say, you're not solely responsible for yourself at that point.
Right. I mean, and your teachers are checking in on you and asking you if, you need help with anything or, letting you know what you're missing or whatever, all of the things. And, they're making sure that you're doing what you need to do. And then you go to college where there's just so much less structure. It's yeah, sure, you have the same classes at the same times on the same days, but you're the only person that's keeping track of yourself.
Right.
You might be able to tell your parents you're doing okay even when you're not because they can't check your grades every day. They can't check your attendance and make sure you're going. Your professors aren't high school teachers. Mm-hmm. They don't have the same investment in your education. And, so, and you know, like, I tell my kids this all the time whenever, because I usually teach sophomores and juniors. And when the juniors are getting ready to decide what to take their senior year, I always encourage them to take the dual credit, like, college algebra course.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be like, no, I don't want to because you have to take, like, the placement test.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like when we were in college. Remember, you had to go to the college and sit in the computer lab and take the placement test. They can take it on their phones anywhere,
Right.
anytime. And it's not a hard test.
No.
And basically, if they take it, they're eligible to do the college algebra class. I don't know of any of them that have taken it that were told no.
Right.
And I always tell them, look, you take it now, you get it out of the way, you get it done for free, and you have a teacher who's there with you who cares about whether you pass or fail.
Right.
When you get to college and you are in sections where there's hundreds of kids, your teachers don't care.
Well,
whether you
yeah,
pass
because
or
that was
fail.
another thing I was thinking when we first brought up the subject, is that your college teachers don't have the same compassion for you
No.
that your high school teachers do. And not all high school teachers are super compassionate towards their students. But for the most part, they care
right
whether you pass or fail.
And there's probably some college professors who are very compassionate. And it also probably depends on the size of the school and how many class kids they have in their sections and, you know, all of these things. But if you're like in a big school, there's hundreds and hundreds of kids taking the class. They don't even know your name.
Yeah.
And you know, like, I think I personally struggled with this because I had undiagnosed ADHD.
Don't we all?
And so, like, I thrive in structure. Like, if I could do the same task at the same time every day, I'm going to be okay.
I mean, to an extent, I get that, but, like, with my ADHD, I can't form a habit.
Right.
And so it's hard for me to do the same thing.
Right.
Every day at the same time.
Well, but, like, I thought back to, like, when I used to work for the local newspaper. And I had multiple deadlines throughout the day. Like, you know, I had to have pages set up by this certain time. And I had to have, like, the ads billed by this certain time. And I had to have, you know, the ads placed by a certain time. And, you know, and it was very structured. You had to have these things done. And like we said earlier, like even before we started, like I'm good with a deadline.
Yeah.
I have something up against, I have to meet that deadline. And so I think I was very successful in that job because it was very structured. Whereas, like, if I'm left to my own devices, absolutely nothing's going to get done.
Right.
And so I can
like,
totally understand where it would be difficult if you're, you know, maybe the same kind of, like, you have, like, neurodivergence or something and it's just not, you know, you're struggling. And so I could see where, you know, if Sydney was struggling with those things too, that she would be, you know, having a hard time going from super structured high school to being left to her own devices.
Right.
And so, like I said, she couldn't keep up, and her grade point average took a major hit. And she was on an academic scholarship, so the school put her on academic probation in her sophomore year, telling her that she needed to improve her grades or she'd lose her scholarship. However, in that first semester of her sophomore year, she failed 3 of her 4 classes, and the university suspended her. And as the, you know, daughter, friend, student who excelled in literally everything prior to this, she was suffering like her first real failure of her life.
Right.
And she didn't know how to handle it. So instead of handling it, she ignored it. And she pretended it didn't happen. And she didn't tell her friends, and she didn't tell her family, and she didn't tell her mom. And when winter break ended, she packed up and went back to school.
Yeah.
She moved back into her dorm room with Lauren. She attended her sorority meetings. I even heard, I think on another podcast, that she even went to class.
Yeah.
And incredibly, she managed this for 2 whole months. And one story I heard about how she eventually got caught by the university was that the person who was, like, in charge of the sorority went to the administration offices to inquire as to why she wasn't on the registration list for that semester. And they were like, because she doesn't go here.
She doesn't even go here.
Yeah. And the sorority was like, but she's been coming to meetings and she lives on campus.
Yeah.
And so school officials confronted Sydney and they told her that she had to leave because she didn't go there anymore. And they offered to help her talk to her parents, but she told them that her parents already knew, which they did not.
No.
And the school deactivated her key card. But when this happened, she just told her roommate that her card must have a glitch and just used her roommate's card. And I guess, I mean, we had a physical key. Mm-hmm. I guess now they're more like hotels where you have to scan to get in. So pretty soon she was caught again because, she's still trying to live on campus. Right. And the school told her, you have to go or we're going to have security remove you. And this was February 24th. So she tells Lauren that her parents want her to take a break from school, and so she's going to move back home for a while. Only she doesn't go home because her parents don't know she was suspended from school.
Right.
So she starts staying in hotels and telling her parents that she's at school. And because she couldn't really afford to live in hotels indefinitely, she'd go home sometimes. And when her parents would be like, why aren't you at school? She would tell them things like, oh, my professor's out of town this week, so we're doing school online.
Yeah. It just seems to me like being honest would be easier.
Right? Yeah, because this is so much work.
Yeah. I get that to an extent. I know that she's lying to everybody, but I think more than anything, she's lying to herself.
Oh, for sure.
And
she's living in another universe.
And it just feels like she's putting herself through more trouble than if she would just come clean. Because I know that she's disappointed and doesn't want
to disappoint her family. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's not the end of the world.
Right. And I think...
And that's what a lot of people don't seem to understand.
Yeah. And I think I say this later, but it's almost like she is trying so hard to be maybe if I just don't accept it, it won't be real. Maybe I can make it go away. Yeah. If I just don't, if I don't accept it as my reality.
It'll go away.
Yeah. So on February 28th, after some of these weird excuses as to why they were seeing her at home at random times on the Life 360 app, Brenda texted Sydney asking, quote, why do I always feel like you're scamming me? So obviously Sydney was not being as smooth in her deception game as she thought she was. And then Brenda texted Sydney again, quote, just remember you need the grades to keep your scholarship. And Sydney responded with, quote, my grades are good, thank you very much. No, they're not. But she's fully committed to the bit.
Yeah.
She has zero intention of admitting to anyone, including herself, what's really going on or what reality is. And Lauren, her friend that she had been living with, said that Sydney came to the sorority's viewing of The Bachelor on March 2nd, and she just seemed her normal, bubbly self. That she wasn't acting weird. She was just coming and hanging out. And so now we're back to March 3rd. So Steve, Sydney's dad, realized that the university hadn't withdrawn his payment for Sydney's tuition for the spring semester. And while she had a scholarship, it wasn't a full scholarship, so her parents were still paying the remainder of her tuition. Mm-hmm. And he tried logging into the payment portal to check on the status and found that his credentials were no longer valid. So he called Sydney, and he told her that the payment hadn't gone through and asked her what was up. And she told him that there must just be a problem with the website or an error in the billing office or something, and that she'd take care of it. But it seems like he didn't really buy her explanation. Yeah. Because he called the school, and they told him that Sydney had been suspended from school. And when he asked for how long, they told him that he'd have to talk to her. Because remember, she's technically an adult now. She's 19. The school doesn't have to give him information. Mm-hmm. So he looks at his Life 360 app and he sees that Sydney's at home, and so he decides to go talk to her. But he's smart though, and he leaves his phone at work so that she wouldn't be able to see that he was on his way home if she checked his location. So he gets there, and he confronts her about this, and she tries to deny it, but she finally breaks down and confesses to everything. And she tells him that she was failing, she got suspended, and she told him how her friends all seemed to have their lives together, and she didn't really know what she was doing or what she wanted to do. And since she had always done so well in high school, she was feeling like a disappointment.
Well, and that was another thing that I was thinking about a minute ago, is this seems to be a common problem for people that excel at a young age.
Right.
They think that they're supposed to continue to excel at that level when they're put in a different situation with so many people on a different level than they are.
Right. And
it's like the big fish in a small pond thing.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think I even talk about this later, but that just reminds me, I watched a YouTube video about this by I think her name is Emma Kinney. Do you ever watch her?
Doesn't sound
familiar.
familiar.
I think I've watched a couple of her episodes now whenever I'm researching. But she was talking about how, like, this is why she thinks that it's okay to fail. Or, like, to learn how to fail.
Yeah.
Because then, whenever something like this happens, it's not so devastating. Like, don't set yourself up for failure. But like, if you
failing
fail,
is not the end of the world.
Understand that it's gonna be okay.
Like, it's genuinely not the end of the world. And you can generally come back from it.
Yep.
And you can even learn things from it.
Exactly.
You know, failure doesn't mean that you're a failure.
Right. And, like, I know, like, I get frustrated because I have students that just don't do anything. And they're going to fail just because they don't do anything. And, like, in those senses, I'm always just like, why? What is the matter with you? Like, at least try. Like, I don't understand why you're not even trying. But, like, the ones that, like, are struggling but they're trying, I'm like, you're not going to fail. Like, at least not my class. Because if you're here and you're trying, like, there's no reason why you should fail.
Right.
But, I don't know. So, Steve does his best. And he tells her, everything's going to be okay. Let's just get through this semester. You'll take a break. We'll figure it out. And he also suggested that she talk to her mom. Because, again, she and her mom are very close. But Brenda also has the job helping children with terminal illnesses cope with their emotions. And so she'd probably be the best person to talk her own child down.
Right.
And help her through this difficult moment in her life. And so just to play it safe, on his way back to work, or I don't know, maybe after he gets back to work because he didn't have his phone, Steve calls Brenda and he kind of briefs her. And Brenda leaves work immediately to go home and talk to Sydney. And on her drive home, she attempted to call the dean of the university to talk to him about what was going on, but didn't get an answer. And so when she got home, according to phone records, at about 12:36 p.m., Associate Dean of Students Michelle Gaffney and Dean of Students John Fraser returned Brenda's call. And they had literally just introduced themselves when they heard a loud sound like something being hit, followed by what Michelle Gaffney describes as the sound of a large exhalation, like someone got the wind knocked out of them. And when she describes this later, she's like, you always hear, like, the phrase, like, they got the wind knocked out of them or something. And she was like, that's exactly what it sounded like. It sounded like that description. And it was followed by screaming and more pounding noises. They both shouted for Brenda, and after about a minute and a half, the call ended. They tried to call back a couple of times, but their calls went to voicemail. And finally, at 12:40, the phone was answered by a calm female voice that identified herself as Brenda Powell. However, both deans realized that this was not the voice that they had spoken to a few minutes before. So John Fraser said that he asked, Sydney, is that you? And the call ended. And luckily, the school officials had the presence of mind to call the Akron Police Department and ask for a welfare check on Brenda. So now we've made it back to the top of the episode. When Brenda was examined, doctors determined that she had 23 stab wounds, mostly to her neck, and several blows to the back of her head. She also had bruising on her face, arms, and hands like she was trying to fend off the blows. And from the time that the first call to Brenda began to the time the school administrators called back and got the person they believed to be Sydney, led investigators to conclude that the attack took only 3.5 minutes. Investigators were also pretty quick to rule out the story of the intruder. For one, the broken window had blood in the glass, indicating that the intruder would have been bloody already when the glass was broken.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it happened after the attack, not before. And it became clear and even more tragic that Sydney was most likely the culprit.
Right. I'm just... It doesn't seem worth it to me.
No, it doesn't.
And, again, like, if you had just been honest from the start...
Yeah. So, more damning evidence against Sydney started coming to light. When the police were called for the welfare check, an officer who was friends with Steve called him to give a heads up that a welfare check had been called in at his house. And so Steve tried to call Brenda, didn't get an answer, so he called Sydney. And I guess at first he just kind of was like, hey, where's your mom? What's up? And Sydney told him that Brenda was on the phone with the school.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve was like, well, the police are on their way to the house because someone called them to check on your mom. And she immediately starts crying and, like, screaming, somebody broke into the house and attacked mom. And so that was weird because, like, at first she was just like, oh, she's just on the phone.
Oh, she's fine. She's on the phone.
Yeah. And then you can see the body cam footage from when the police are at the house. And so, like I said earlier, Sydney's screaming and she's crying at first. And it almost seems like she's trying to keep the police out of her mom's room because they tell her that she needs to move so they can get, like, back where she was.
Mm-hmm.
And Sydney is like, no, there's so much blood. But they escort her out, and she tells them that someone broke in, and her mom told her to run, but that she came back, and she found her mom, and she ran to her mom. And the cops realize also that Sydney is also actively bleeding from
Mm-hmm.
cuts on her hands. And so they take her out to the end of the driveway to be checked out. And also so that they can get to Brenda and see about her. And Sydney starts... It's bedtime. And Sydney starts screaming for her dad. And when Steve arrives, he tries to go inside to check on Brenda. But of course, the police can't let him go inside.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly, Sydney is no longer screaming. But she seems to go into, like, a catatonic state.
Yeah.
She's laying on the driveway. She's scratching on the pavement with her fingernail. They're asking her questions. She isn't answering anything. And so they end up loading her up on a stretcher. Mm-hmm. And they take her to the hospital psychiatric unit.
Right.
And unfortunately, like I reported at the beginning, Brenda was still alive when the police arrived but died after arriving at the hospital. And there's footage of Stephen in a conference room with the police when he receives the news that Brenda died. And they tell him that they think Sydney's the person who attacked her. And he just completely breaks down and he's like, so I've lost both of them.
Yeah. That's pitiful.
Yeah. And everyone was in complete shock that Sydney attacked Brenda because, like I've said so many times throughout the episode, they were incredibly close.
Yeah.
And Sydney had also never shown any violent tendencies in the past. She wasn't known to use drugs. And so the question was, like, what made her kill her mom? And because this reaction... Well, mostly just because the reaction to being found out about being suspended from school was just so extreme. Like, that, like you said, it just doesn't seem worth it. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Like, failing college doesn't seem... And, like, not wanting to tell your mom...
Right.
Doesn't seem worth killing your mom.
Yeah. And, like... I think that at some point, like, even when, like, they first suspended her, the university was even like, you know, we can revisit this and we can figure out a way to get you back in school and, you know, maybe you just need to take a break and, you know, and so none of it seemed like the end of the world.
Right.
But it reminds me a little bit of the girl who killed her baby. Like, I don't want to tell anybody I'm pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just going to kill my baby. Which is, like, so extreme when there's so many other options.
Right.
So, she was arrested and charged with her mother's murder, felonious assault, which resulted in death, and tampering with evidence by staging the scene. She ultimately pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Now, if you remember the date of this attack, it was March 3rd, 2020. And so it was just as COVID was ramping up. It was right before the initial quarantine period. So, since everybody kind of was up in the air and didn't know what was going on and didn't know when trials would be able to be held or whatever, Sydney was released to her family on bond until her murder trial would begin. And her whole family, including her father, her brother, and even her maternal grandmother, wanted the murder charges dropped because they sincerely believed that she must be suffering from some kind of psychotic break for this to happen.
I don't know.
And they just wanted her to get help. But she did kill her mother, and murder charges aren't something you can just decide not to pursue.
Yeah.
So during the period she was released pending her trial, she went to live with Brenda's mother on her ranch, and she helped with the animals, having a particular fondness for the horses, and she was receiving psychiatric care during this period and taking medication, and her mental state seemed to be getting better. So Sydney's murder trial began on September 7th, 2023, and in a, quote-unquote normal criminal trial, the burden is on the state to provide enough evidence of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
Mm-hmm.
With an insanity defense, the burden is on the defense to prove severe mental disease or defect. And so the defense called 4 psychiatric experts who examined Sydney, and they all argued that she suffered from acute schizophrenia and was suffering a psychotic break when she attacked her mother and couldn't appreciate the wrongfulness of her actions as they were happening. Dr. James Reardon diagnosed her with schizophrenia and major depressive disorder. He testified that Sydney didn't remember the attack and only remembered flashes of that day, like sitting with her mom on the couch, and that her next memory was being in the hospital. He also testified that her mental state had been deteriorating and she was losing grip on reality in the 3 months leading up to the murder, and that all of the lies to her parents about being enrolled in school and still living there and all of the bizarre things she was doing was her living in an alternate reality in hopes that she could make it be real. Which I also think she was living in an alternate reality.
Exactly.
Now, whether I don't know whether it was schizophrenia or something else. I don't know.
Yeah.
He did admit under cross-examination that it is rare for a person suffering schizophrenia to act out violently, and that schizophrenia alone did not give her a pass on her murder charge. But he said that the most relevant evidence of a psychotic break was the fact that the attack lasted only 3.5 minutes because of the spontaneity and brutality, plus the lack of a clear motive. And he also testified that this was the most severe psychotic break that he had seen in almost 50 years of practice. The defense also called on Brenda's mother to testify to the fact that while Sydney was living with her on the farm, that her mental state seemed to be improving while she was on her medication. A nurse from the university testified that she noticed signs of Sydney gradually isolating herself, but she didn't think that what she was observing was concerning enough to talk to her parents. Sydney's English teacher from high school testified for the defense of a time in high school when Sydney went to her having a full meltdown over, I think it was her chemistry class, like either a test or a project or something. Mm-hmm. And she just kept saying over and over, "I can't see the numbers." And the teacher took her to the chemistry teacher, and that teacher gave her an extension, but again didn't report the incident to parents or school officials because she had never seen Sydney experience any mental health issues before, and she didn't observe any after that incident. A neuropsychologist testified that he diagnosed Sydney with schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type, and agreed that she was in an acute psychotic state at the time of the murder, and that she was suffering from schizophrenic symptoms until May 2020, and then was suffering from suicidal ideation for 4 months after that. He also agreed with Dr. Reardon that the lack of motive also convinced him that Sydney was insane and could not tell right from wrong when she murdered her mother. Another expert testified that he believed her psychotic break began when she was instructed to move out of her dorm, and that when she was staying in the hotel, she was losing time and getting more paranoid and losing touch with reality more and more. The final expert witness for the defense was Dr. Anthony Smartnick, who was the doctor who treated Sydney after she left the hospital and had continued her care through the bond release and through her trial. He also diagnosed her with schizoaffective disorder and prescribed antipsychotic drugs, which he testified that she responded well to after some tweaking of drugs and dosages when she had breakthrough symptoms. I will admit that I don't know the difference between schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't look that up. Do you happen to know?
No, but I can Google it.
Okay. Because if they're all different things, then we have 4 doctors who have diagnosed her basically with 4 different things. Maybe similar things, but different things.
It says schizophrenia involves persistent psychotic symptoms like hallucinations, delusions, disorganized thinking, while schizoaffective disorder features both schizophrenia-like psychosis and significant mood episodes, depression, or mania that occur alongside or separate from the psychotic symptoms, with mood symptoms lasting for a substantial portion of the illness.
Okay. So kind of like schizophrenia with depression.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the prosecution's rebuttal to this defense was that they fully agreed that the brutality of the attack was indeed a sign that she was mentally unstable, but she wasn't psychotic, and she knew that what she did was wrong and illegal.
It's just like in other cases where people try to use the insanity plea, like, and I always hate saying her name like this.
Maria Sanchez?
Yeah, but Letitia Stout, but I don't like to use her last name.
Yeah, but you don't know what her actual last name is.
I don't know what her maiden name is.
Okay.
I'd have to Google it.
Yeah.
But she tried to plead insanity.
Right.
And it's like, no, what you did was batshit.
Yeah.
But not in the way you're trying to say
right.
that you're crazy.
You're crazy, but you're not the correct crazy that you're trying to claim. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, the prosecution, that is, claimed that there were 2 significant actions on Sydney's part that they felt ruled out a psychotic episode. 1, she had the presence of mind to try to cover up her crime by staging a break-in. And 2, she changed weapons mid-attack. So, just to elaborate on those, remember, she tried to cover up her crime by staging a break-in and going outside to break the window and telling police and her father that there had been a break-in. Plus, she told her dad that her mom was on the phone with the college after the attack had already occurred and only told him that there was an intruder when he said the police were on their way. And the school officials testified that Sydney answered the phone pretending to be Brenda after the attack and that she was calm and didn't sound like someone who had just brutally murdered somebody. The second thing was that she used 2 weapons. So she initially hit Brenda in the head with the cast iron skillet multiple times, which I cannot imagine because it is hard for me to pick up a cast iron skillet and move it across the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. But adrenaline does crazy things.
That's true. But she hit her with the cast iron skillet multiple times before stopping her attack and switching to a knife. Prosecution also had a friend testify that in the weeks leading up to the attack and even the night before at the bachelor viewing party, that Sydney was acting normally. They also agreed that all examinations of Sydney occurred post-attack when she was feeling pressured to appear psychotic.
Okay.
Which makes sense because, they had no reason to observe her beforehand. And if she was trying to get away with murder, like, you would try to act like maybe you were crazy. The prosecution called only one expert witness, Dr. Sylvia Obradovich, a clinical psychologist. Dr. Obradovich evaluated Sydney for 2 hours and diagnosed her not with schizophrenia, but with borderline personality traits and unspecified anxiety disorder. And ultimately, she felt that Sydney was malingering, aka faking it.
Oh, yeah.
So while the experts for the defense claimed that Sydney had been experiencing symptoms of schizophrenia since age 11, with no evidence to back up those claims, Dr. Obradovich said that it would be extremely rare as girls usually start showing symptoms in their mid to late 20s, and it was also rare that those symptoms would have gone unnoticed by her family. Now, After the Slender Man stabbing case, we know that it is possible for children to have early onset schizophrenia because that's what Morgan Geyser was diagnosed with. But in her instance, I think her hallucinations were noticed by her family as a child, but at the time were thought to be more of like overactive imagination because I think her family was all, I'm talking about Morgan Geyser, her family was all like into weird stuff anyway, like horror stuff, and so like her drawing Slender Man on the napkin at dinner wasn't necessarily weird.
Be like a red flag to
right
them.
But I feel like in this family it probably would have been weird. I mean, not that she was drawing Slender Man, but you know, plus her mom was kind of like a therapist a little bit. I think her mom would have noticed. Additionally, Dr. Obradovich claimed that rather than being catatonic in the body cam footage from the driveway right after the attack, Sydney was just suffering from the shock of what she had just done. Because catatonia would last 24 hours to several days, and that it isn't something you just go in and out of.
Right.
She also felt that Sydney was not psychotic, just willing to kill her mother rather than disappoint her. So during the trial, there are pictures of Sydney covering her ears and crying when experts are detailing what was done to her mother. She also at one point requested to be allowed to leave the courtroom during testimony. On September 20th, 2023, 2 days after the prosecution rested its case, the jury came back with a verdict of guilty on all charges. And during sentencing, Sydney's defense reiterated Sydney's remorse, her continued psychological care and use of medications, and her markedly improved mental state. Her father and Brenda's husband, Steve, pleaded with the judge for leniency and forgiveness, but given the severity of the crime and the knowledge that Brenda suffered a great deal at the hands of her daughter and died a slow, painful death, the judge sentenced Sydney to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. So this ended up being a highly controversial case.
Okay.
And, because you have psychiatrists all evaluating the same person and coming up with different diagnoses.
Yeah.
So it also sparked discussions on mental health stigmas and how those defenses are presented in criminal case trials and how sentencing can be affected. Like, should the family's wishes have been taken into account in her sentencing, given that they lost a wife and a mother and a daughter, but still felt that Sydney needed help? Well, the story doesn't end here. So in late 2024, Sydney's defense team appealed her conviction, arguing that the judge did not allow them to rebut the prosecution's expert witness. The judge's reasoning was that there had been, quote, lots and lots and lots of expert testimony, and felt that the jury had sufficient information to make a decision. The appellate court ruled that, wow, I'm going to re-say that word because that is the wrong... appellate court.
I was just thinking to myself, I was like, I think it's appellate.
It is appellate. And it's funny because the other day I was like, I'm going to say that wrong, even though I know the correct way to say it. Anyway, the appellate court ruled that the defense had a, quote, unconditional right to rebut the state's expert witness and awarded Sydney a new trial. However, of course, the state appealed that decision, and it's now in the hands of the Supreme Court. On Wednesday of just this last week, attorneys for both the state and Brenda Powell appeared before the Ohio Supreme Court to argue their cases. The defense argued the decision by the appellate court that they have an unconditional right to rebut. However, the state's attorney argued that this sets a bad precedent and that it would open up the possibility of endless trials of just going back and forth with rebuttals. So according to a Court TV article online, the justices said that they would take the arguments under advisement and give a ruling, but they didn't give a timetable. So I guess we'll probably get an update on that in the near future since they've already heard the arguments. A Medium article on the case concluded with, quote, while legal consequences now confine Sydney to past choices, true justice involves learning from tragedies. There may be opportunities to improve early intervention when children first display perfectionist tendencies or withdrawal stemming from inner turmoil, which is kind of what you were saying a minute ago. Schools and parents noticing these red flags can seek solutions through counseling. By rebuilding our systems that value human wholeness, perhaps future Sydneys might feel comfortable confiding inner struggles sooner without shame. If we shift culture and mindsets from reaction to compassion, there is hope to redirect similar young people from the brink instead of judging perceived failures after. And that is the tragic story of the murder of Brenda Powell.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the murder of Rob and Michelle Reiner kind of brought that back into my brain, because I think Nick Reiner is going to plead insanity in that defense, and I think he's also been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and they think he was in the middle of a psychotic break when he murdered his family.
I guess we'll see.
But the Brenda Powell story also has an episode of Snapped.
Mm-hmm.
And then I listened to a podcast called Nerdery and Murdery.
Okay.
And so part of the episode, you'll love this, I guess they talk about nerd stuff, like the first half. One of them talks nerd stuff, and then the other one tells a murder story.
Okay.
And I know, it's so bizarre. But the nerd half of this particular episode was just singing the 10th Doctor's praises. It was just all about David Tennant's run as the Doctor, and that's all it was for like an hour. It was just talking about how great David Tennant was as the Doctor.
He was the best Doctor, and I feel like there's plenty of proof to that, with the fact that he regenerated into himself multiple times.
Well, and that was kind of even what this guy was saying. He was like, if it hadn't been for David Tennant's Doctor, like, run as the Doctor, the show probably wouldn't still be on.
No.
Like, it probably would have ended, like, if it had been another, like, Chris Eccleston or something. Like, it probably wouldn't have lasted, like, as long as it did.
And I honestly don't mind Chris Eccleston's run as the Doctor, because there were some really good episodes.
Yeah. I think it's just, I still remember, because I didn't know anything about the show before David Tennant was the Doctor. And I think I really only started watching it after Matt Smith became the Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, Matt Smith will always be my Doctor, because he's the one that I started with.
And I started with David Tennant.
But it was just so funny, because then whenever you made me go back and start from like the re-beginning or whatever, I didn't know that Chris Eccleston was supposed to be the Doctor at first, because he's so different from David Tennant's and Matt Smith's Doctors that I was like, who's this guy? This is not the Doctor.
Where's the Doctor?
This is not correct. And I still feel that way. But I know that there's lots of people that are like, Chris Eccleston is the Doctor. I'm like, no, he's not. You're wrong. The only argument that I had with this guy from Nerdery and Murdery was he didn't like Donna.
That's weird.
In fact, I don't remember if it was the guy who was like in charge of that part of the episode, or if it was just like the co-host that was saying that he didn't really enjoy Donna. One of them did not enjoy Donna. And I'm like,
they're wrong.
You're wrong. I don't know how you don't enjoy Donna. I can totally understand why you don't enjoy Rose, because I hate Rose. And I didn't hate her, but I didn't like Martha.
I think after as many times as I've watched it, I honestly prefer Rose over Martha.
Yeah.
I never really cared for Martha as the Doctor's companion.
No.
But Rose grew on me a little bit over the years.
Yeah.
She's still not my favorite by any stretch. But I can tolerate her better now, and I still don't like Martha as his companion.
Yeah, I just never really liked Martha. But I just didn't like Rose. But I love Donna.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I just love Amy and Rory. And so, like, to me, they're the best ones. But that's, everybody has their favorites.
Yeah.
But I would like to see a show of hands who likes Martha.
Right.
Nobody raises their hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was funny that it was like, that's what half of the episode was just talking about David Tennant's run as the Doctor.
Nice.
Yep.
And coming back to it, I did a Google, and a lot of people are referring to her as Letitia Harden.
Harden? Oh, okay.
I don't know if that's her maiden name. I don't know if that was her name from her previous marriage.
Yeah.
Because she has a daughter from a previous relationship, and I don't know if she and that guy were ever married.
Yeah.
But she does have a daughter from a previous relationship, and so I saw multiple articles referring to her as Letitia Harden.
Well, yeah, and I remember from, like, you telling me about it that the little boy's dad was like, please stop using my name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of his pleas at the end of the trial, was that no one call her Letitia Stalk anymore because she didn't want her to have Gannon's last name.
Yep. Yeah, she didn't deserve that, for sure. She didn't
deserve to have the same last name as the kid that she killed.
Yep.
So, we will cover that in depth eventually, though. I've got to go back and rewatch the trial, which is very long. I watched it in real time when it was happening, but there's just so much that I feel like I need to rewatch the trial before I try to tell anybody what happened in the trial.
I know, like, I half expected you to know this story because it was also covered on Court TV.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I wonder if...
I know the name, but I don't think that I really knew the case.
Yeah. Oh, and then it's so crazy because one of Donald Trump's attorneys that was, like, one of the conspiracy theorist ones that he had that was part of the whole election fraud thing. Her name was Sidney Powell.
Yeah.
And so whenever I was searching Sidney Powell, it kept coming up with her instead. Yeah. But I think the Sidney Powell from this story is SYDNEY, and that one is SIDNEY.
Yeah.
But yeah, it kept coming up with that whenever I would search for anything on this case. Well, anyway, so remember that you can find us on social media at Twisted and Mysterious, or you can email us at twistedandmysteriousPodcast@gmail.com. We would love it if you would rate and review us and follow us and subscribe and do all of the things and say nice things.
Send us your story suggestions or your personal experiences with paranormal or mysterious things or true crime.
I have a funny paranormal story that I will share with you guys if you share yours with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw a UFO the other day.
The one that we saw when we were driving? Or a different one?
The one that you didn't see that I saw. But yeah.
The one that you said looked like the moon?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Because I saw it dark afterwards. Yeah. I just didn't see when it was lit up.
But yeah, like, it was just this bright light in the sky for a minute, and then it was, you could see it still, but it was just a dark craft of some sort. So, I don't know what that was.
Yeah. Me either.
But it was...
I say it's a drone.
I don't know. It just seemed too big to be a drone. And I know there's drones of all sizes.
Yeah.
But, like, this thing looked big.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have to get up and take cats to the vet bright and early in the morning, so we better go to bed.
Yeah, we have to be up at 5 to get 7 cats neutered.
Yep. For free.
For free. We're really thankful to this clinic where we are taking them.
Yeah.
They have been, and I use this term loosely, a godsend.
For sure. They've definitely...
They are literal angels.
For sure. Yeah, they're fixing them. They
vaccinating them, microchipping, all for free. They even gave us some antibiotics for one of the cats for free, and...
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know who's funding that operation.
But they are a saint.
Yep. All right, well, it's been nice seeing you guys again.
Yep. So... sorry for the delay. We'll try to get back on a regular schedule as soon as possible. Other than that, remember that people are gross and don't get murdered.
And it's okay to fail sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
Bye.